Hi there. Hi, guys. How's it going this Tuesday? Dr. Missy Hood with the 15-minute rep. I was laughing to myself because I realized I'm just sitting here singing to myself in the mic and not realizing anybody can hear it. And I'm sorry for the agitation for you having to listen to me. But yeah, there you go. Uh, that's what happens when you're not paying attention. But sorry about that. Anyway, welcome to the Rev. I'm Dr. Missy. It's always great to see. Hate the background. I'm sorry, I don't like this background at all. I will get Streamlabs fixed. I just don't like this at all. This is not me. I like the quirky, fun stuff, and so we're gonna get that back up and running. I've been promising that to you for a long time, and it's just life happens, You get really, really busy doing stuff. But I hope you're having a great day today. Hope you're having a great week, having a great weekend, and before we get going, I want to thank MargaretRowe.com. I want to thank Margaret as our sponsor. If you haven't checked her out, man, she's up and coming. Go check her out at margaretrowe.com. Go check out her jewelry. She was the LA Jewelry Designer of the Year in LA. And so she's just got a lot of things happening right now. A lot of beautiful stuff coming out. New brand coming out, actually, or new line, I should say, not a new brand, a new line underneath her design concept. And so beautiful crosses and stuff like that. So you want to go check her out. So she's got some cool stuff. Also, want to thank we're going to be looking forward to having Brett Starling on here April the 4th. If you guys haven't heard my Aussie friend Brett, he's a prophetic voice that we love to connect with and find out what's going on in the atmosphere and what's going on prophetically. Highly accurate prophet, and everything he prophesies comes to pass. So go make sure you put this on your calendar and check him out. And we're gonna look forward to speaking with him here soon. So put that on your calendar, most definitely. What's going on with you? What's going on with you? This has been an interesting couple of weeks, I think, for me. With regard to it's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but yeah, interesting topic today too. Interesting topic for this Tuesday. I found myself going through my quiet time today, and it's funny to me how this kind of unfolds every time I start doing these because I never know where they're going, and God will have me start off on a trajectory. And today, I actually did this and talked a little bit about this information to our teams today because I'm sensing a lot of frustration in the atmosphere. Just a lot of frustration in the body of Christ with regard to what's happening in our nation, the time that it's taking for this to actually unfold, and what is God doing, and why is this taking so long, and all that, the grumbling and complaining stuff. But interestingly enough, before I jump in, I'm going to tell you what the title is today, because the title is called The Hardest Part of Accountability, and Being Found Out When God Exposes You. And hard test. It's called hard test. Hardest part of accountability, being found out. Hard test. And then the difficulty of waiting. Interestingly enough, and I again was surprised by this because I feel like a lot of people, part of me I wanted to do this live today because I feel like it generates people wanting to participate and stuff like that. But God said no. He's wanting me to stay on a recording, so I'm gonna do the recordings for Tuesdays, and then I'll meet with you live on Fridays. And I always love my time with you. And I got a new haircut too, so it's just kind of all over the place there. But anyway, what's God talking to you about today? I got in my Jeep yesterday, and I found myself saying this, and I had no idea it was going to be the prequel for the conversation today to you. And because we're dealing with so much warfare right now. Remember, in a week is C2. That's chamber 2 of God's heart, chamber 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's as you learn to enter into intimacy with the King. And so C2 is the hardest part of the year that we're entering into in a week again, in a week. And so make sure April 30th through August 31st that you're breaking off early death assignments, freak accidents. If you have that in your bloodline, people who might have died early, or maybe you haven't felt well. Hopefully you're not. That's not you. Break it off. You can do it with Deuteronomy 27 and 28 and Luke 10:19. Those are the scriptures you want to use, and asking God to renounce you, that you renounce, you rebuke, you nullify that. And with Luke 10:19 and Deuteronomy 27 and 28, you renounce it for yourself. You ask God to forgive you and your forefathers back to Adam and Eve, who've opened up the doors for those cursings to come in of early death, freak accidents, and you ask God to shut the door. Revelations 3:7. It's 100% effective 100% of the time. And so what's really, really interesting about C2 as you come in, you need to understand that it's a high level testing season for the mind of Christ. Okay. So most people, if you understand anything about our summers before this mess started happening, before the maturity process, because it's a maturity tool, actually C2 is a maturity tool. And but before it started happening, we used to have easy summers. I don't know about you. I had great summers. I had leisurely summers. I had wonderful, even if when I was working in a job after I got out of high school and then college, I worked in different jobs. But I had great summers. I just look forward to the summertime. And then we started having these cockeyed times, cockeyed spiritual warfare times. And so I started finding myself trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And I realized it was witchcraft. I'm thinking, witchcraft? What the heck is that? What do I want anything to do with that for? I don't, but God made me. And so hopefully you have a great relationship with God. And if you don't, you need to come on up and get on in, because that's where the safe place is and you need to begin again. But so this brings me back to my point yesterday when I was getting into my Jeep before we went through this test, this hard test we find ourselves in. And so C2 then is this place that we're having to step into to learn how to either come up higher into God's firepower, or you're going to digress. You're going to go low. You're going to stay in the flesh. And so it's also accompanied, if you're in the flesh, it's usually accompanied by strange fire or spirit of confusion. So it makes it really hard to hear spiritually if you have fivefold giftings. And it's just a really frustrating time. And so throughout the 4 months of April 30th through August 31st, while you're trying to enter into the divine or higher levels of God's spirit, you're having to take your thoughts captive and casting down all things that don't align with the truth of what God told you or with what God says is true. So you have to know the word too. You got to know the word too. And so that means Job 36:32, you're going to be striking things down that are not of God. And you're going to be staying in love. You're going to be staying in the truth. You're going to be staying close to things that you know God told you. And so in your fighting aren't aligning with that. That's what you're trying to stay within. Okay. And so then as you enter into the ninth of Av, which is that narrowing place, because all throughout C2, you're also taking off efforts, hopefully, to get rid of more of your flesh or making less of you, making or getting rid of the flesh, getting rid of you to where more of God can come in. So you're making room for the king to come in with more firepower. Okay. So what's really interesting about this, because this is a hard test and we've already been in a test now for about 4.5 years, actually longer than that, but for most of us, about 4.5 years, and going through C2 every year while we're doing this. And I kind of realized yesterday as I got into my Jeep, I thought, I'm not in control of this thing. I'm not in control of this thing. I'm not in control of where God's taking me. I'm not in control of what's coming at me. I'm just in control of how I respond to it. And so I thought, okay, so however long this test goes on, however long God has me here, I'm going to learn to make the best of it. And I'm just going to accept whatever he sends me. And I'm going to have joy despite the storm, joy, whatever is around me. I'm going to maintain God. I'm going to maintain God. I'm going to maintain truth. And so it really, really changed my attitude, because I realized, well, Lord, whenever you do this thing is whenever you do it. That's usually your heart's desire, right? Whatever you're praying in. And so I'm just, I'm praying and I'm continuing to move ahead. And I'm focusing on all the other areas of my life that I'm really, really enjoying right now while I pray this thing in. It doesn't mean you give up on what you're praying for. It just means that you're not going to let it control your whole life and dictate your whole life. And I said that to the Lord. And when I said it, I knew he was going to do it. That's another thing. That's called giving something over to the Lord. You're entering into rest at that point because you've done everything you know to do. And so God's now doing what he's going to do. And when God gets involved in a thing, that's when things are fixing to start moving and shaking. That's also a wonderful thing. So anyway, so in the middle of all this crazy stuff yesterday, because I was seeing all these different comments on social media, and I get tickled at social media. Matter of fact, we're gonna get into that comment and that conversation today too. But I watch what people post. Obviously, we're all paying attention, hopefully, to what people are posting. And I've been noticing that people are depressed. They're depressed and they're frustrated and they're agitated, and you can just feel it in things that they post. And I'm thinking, what the heck? What the heck's up with this? And hence what God told me yesterday, but then I got a call from a prophetic friend yesterday who's highly accurate in the prophetic gifting. And she said, Missy, God gave me a word for you. And I said, He did. She said, He did. Yeah, He did. And He wants me to talk to you about Caleb and Joshua. And I thought in my head, I'm running on Mach 10 anyway. So I'm thinking to myself, I do not have time for this, Lord. Lord, I did not have time today. And He said, well, I sent my prophet to you, so you better make the time. I'm like, yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So I did. I listened. And so I'm sitting there and she's talking about Caleb and Joshua. And she said, do you realize that Caleb and Joshua were the only ones that went into the land? And in my head, I'm dialoguing back and forth. I'm thinking, okay, let's wrap this up. Let's get this going. Let's get this going. And the Lord said, you better listen to me. Listen to what I'm telling you. This is the answer to all your questions that you've been going through. And I'm thinking, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Slow this jet down. Okay, let's go. So I said, okay. And she said, and can you imagine, Missy, what it must have felt like for Joshua and Caleb to have had to deal with all the other people who didn't believe around them? She said it's everywhere today. People just don't believe. They're just like, oh, God's waited too long. And it's just too long. It's over. It's over. My life's over. The promise is over. I don't have anything to look forward to. It's just over. And God said, would you get a grip on it? It is so not true. That is so not true. So I got the point, needless to say. And I realized what God was saying to me in that moment was that only 2 people had the faith to move on through into the new. Now, remember what the rabbi said about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was Rabbi Landry. He said there were 4 people groups. That's narrowed down to 2 now. And we entered into a trust test, right? We entered into a trust test with just 2 groups. Let me put it like that. It's a lot easier to understand. Here's our 2 groups. This is what I did in school. How much is 1 and 1? It's 1. It's 1. I didn't do that. I'm just kidding. Okay, so there were 2 people groups. Let's put it like that. So there were 2 people groups, and only one's getting in because only one is staying in trust. Only one is staying in faith. And so I got the point what the Lord was saying yesterday when He said, "You have to continue to believe me in all things." But what hinders our belief? What hinders our faith? What hinders your belief and your faith is when you start to doubt, or when you start to not take your thoughts captive. Now, if you know anything about witchcraft, the 5 red flags of witchcraft are fear, doubt, unbelief, discouragement, and depression, which lead into hope deferred. Hope deferred makes a heart sick. And so if I get any of those negative emotions, I'm sure that I make myself aware that there's witchcraft in the room. I start striking things down, because what happens then if you don't strike them down is you start getting into murmuring and complaining like the Israelites did. Oh, God. Oh, this is taking too long. Oh, I can't do this. No, God, I hate it. Hate it where I'm at right now. Hate my life. Don't like it. Mad at you. Don't talk to this prophet. Not listening to you. And the whole time, God is sitting there shaking his head, thinking, are they ever going to have faith? Are they ever going to believe me for what I told them I would do? Because if you know anything about true faith and true belief, true belief believes God no matter what you feel, no matter what you see or don't see, no matter what you discern or don't discern, because that's called walking in blind faith. Now, remember, your faith has nothing to do with your feelings. Your feelings have nothing to do with your faith. Your gifts have nothing to do with your faith. Your perception, your knower, your perceiver, your ability to see as God sees has nothing to do. They're 2 separate entities. Those are 2 separate entities. And so you've got to be able to separate the truth between those 2 things and realize that God is a God of his word. If he says a thing to you, then it's all contingent upon him. And you do have to do your part and pray the thing through. But you're not basing your faith on any other thing, no other thing but what he said to you. Okay, so and then part of the key in that then is being able to walk the thing out while God brings you through, and being able to get rid of you. So you're making room for more faith. God is the way, the truth, and the life. And you're trying to make room for him, make room for his spirit to come in. And then his faith in you, Jesus lives in you, right? His faith in you makes things ignite. So when God speaks a thing, he watches over his word to perform it. So it's you cease to sorry. You cease to stop relying upon your own measure of faith, and you're relying upon the faith of the King within thee. And so when Jesus prays through you, then he's speaking the thing to the King of the Father above, and the Father can't deny himself. So the Spirit watches over his word to perform it, and the Lord can't deny himself. So the more of Jesus you have, the more power you have, the more truth you have, the more answered prayer you have. Follow me? So you want to stay in truth. You want to stay in faith because God's in this thing. He's in this thing. And if he told you he's bringing it back, he's bringing it all back. He's bringing it all back. He's bringing it back. Okay, I'm just going to get that out there. So there you go. So that's what stops you is the murmuring and complaining, the doubt and the unbelief, the discouragement, the depression. And it was funny because I was watching, I have to bring this up because I watch TikTok a lot. And TikTok's fun. But you know, you can get really absorbed in it and waste a lot of time in it. So I can't let that happen because I'm too busy. So late at night when I'm trying to wind down, I watch TikTok and I was watching. You know what? I'm not going to go there. I'll save that. Let me say that to another part of the conversation. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so that's what you don't want to do. So then that leads us to have to look at ourselves. If you're struggling with these 5 characteristics, okay? Fear, doubt, unbelief, discouragement, depression, hopelessness, and despair. And so I asked the Lord at this point, by the way, in the conversation, I said, God, what makes people get into grumbling and complaining? What makes them get into doubt? And he said, they don't ask themselves honest questions about what's really bothering them. Like, do they think they're too old to be going through this? Or like, are they fearful that they're never going to receive the promise? Do they feel capable? Do they feel unworthy of receiving what I told them I would give to them? And so basically, it was getting authentic. It was getting truthful with God about what's bothering you. What is bugging you? Is it you? I mean, is it time? Is it what you're afraid you're going to miss out on because of not having had the answer to prayer yet? But see, God says everything's made beautiful in its own time. And so I'm sure if I know the goodness of God, which I think I do, I think you do too, is that has God ever not shown up when you've asked for a thing? And he's always right on time. It's like the perfect time. Everything's aligned and everything just works out. Everything just works out. And so it's just really, really, okay. So we have to get honest with ourselves. We have to get honest with God to see what God's trying to get us to deal with in our own hearts. Because again, I noticed the unhappiness of people, social media posts, and because they were unhappy about things not happening as quickly as they had planned. They had planned. Notice I said they had planned this, and this is my timeline, God. And you need to get a bump on it, and you just need to jump on it, and you need to do this thing, God. I've been praying and I've been waiting, and by God, it's time. And God said, it's your time, but it's not my time. It's not my time yet. So this is the cause of bad attitudes. And I too have been struggling with that too. And that causes murmuring and complaining, where the Bible says that you're to suffer in silence. And I thought, where's the love in that? No, I'm just, I was just thinking, what in the heck? I read that again today and I thought, suffer in silence. Well, it says, yes, you need to suffer like a good soldier. And I thought, suffer? You want me to suffer? And he said, I want you to mature. I want you to quit grumbling and complaining like a 5-year-old. Because you're not getting your way right now like a 5-year-old behaves. Pardon me. And I want you to start looking at things from my perspective because I know what you can deal with today. This is where you're at today. So I really started seeing what God was really saying in that moment about the body of Christ. We still got a little bit of growing up to do. And he said, don't speak it. God said, don't speak the concern. Don't speak the grumble. Don't even speak the grumble to me. Don't bring your grumble to me. because I know your heart, and I'm looking to see if you're going to obey and still come forward. And I said, God's telling you how to take the test. He's telling you how to take this test. So, in this whole process, I'm having to look at my own heart and keep coming forward. And the Lord told me this, which was kind of a hard dose of reality. Because he told me, he said, miss, he said, when I died on the cross, he said, I gave it all. I laid down my life. And so if that's all I ever do for you in this moment or in this time that you have on the earth, is that enough? Is it enough? Are you seeking me for my hand? Or are you seeking me for my heart? Because if you seek me for the right thing, you're going to get it all. But you've got to differentiate those things. Because if I never do anything else for you, that should be enough. He goes, because the only thing I owe you is to love you. And I do that immensely, immensely. So you have to ask yourself that thing. Is his love for me enough? If this is all I ever get in this lifetime with where I'm at, what God has given me, this little portion in my part of the kingdom, is that enough? Is that enough? And so, because if it is, then you just set yourself up for the biggest setup of blessing where God is wanting to take you in. But this actual place he does want to take us into actually is the biggest part of our walk with God in this hour. And it's the hardest part. The Lord said in C2 this year, he's fixing to muscle us up. And I thought he was going to be doing one thing, but he's actually doing another. And I was really shocked today to find out what that muscling up concept really entails, because in muscling us up means you're coming deeper into love. And I thought, oh, wow, because love is the most powerful force on earth. And so if we're going to learn to come back to Christ again and operate in the double glory, you're going to need the deep love of God. That's where he's taking us into. But what does that mean? That means you're going to have to get authentic and get real with God about where you're currently at. And you're going to have to get to know you. To know myself is to be true to myself, but also if I know me better than you know me or another man knows me, then nobody can control me. If I know myself better than the devil knows me, he can't control me. But if I don't know me, and say you're discerning and you have fivefold giftings, which is what's happening in the body today with these people who abuse their gifts. They manipulate and control everybody with them. And God's like, enough of that. That's an idolatry spirit on you. That means you've made more of yourself and of your gift than you ought to. You've made yourself a little G. And the Lord says, you better get your butt off my throne before I flick it off. And when God flicks you, one little movement of his pinky can slam an angel against the wall. So be careful in what you do. And this is the prophetic word that he showed me, which is part of the prophetic word for the body of Christ, and for people that are caught in corruption right now. He said, God showed me this persecution is what length people will go to when they're terrified of being exposed and facing accountability. So you can only expect more in the days ahead as I move you through C2 and through time, because for the first time in these people's lives, they know they're not getting away with their sin anymore. And it's the reason for the influx of witchcraft, says the Lord. And the Lord says, try not to take it personally. Try not to take it personally as I use your vessels to plow in the truth, because in doing so, we'll remove all the debris trying to clutter the atmospheres while I'm drawing near. He said, again, it's not that you've done anything wrong, bride. It's just that your enemies are in tune with the wrong song. And now my band is playing, and I no longer allow instruments who are off key or off my frequency to come before me spiritually. I'm not hearing them anymore. So they've turned to other things like witchcraft, occult practices in order to keep their sin intact. But it's not working, as you can see. So your prayers are packing a punch spiritually now for those of you who've chosen to believe. Because much of these enemies' fears are based on the fact that many around them now are questioning them. Now, those prophetic voices who question those who are being held accountable because they suspect hidden sin. And you're hearing rightly. You're hearing rightly, which brings us to the conversation of Numbers 28:16 through 29:40. And it's talking about true authenticity and responsibility, and being real with God, being real with each other, despite, the gifts God's given you, and also being honoring, being full of honor. This whole new place we're coming into, the number one component is honor. Do you respect God in another? Do you respect the Lord first? But do you respect God in another person? And do you respect what God has given to them? It's going to be exemplified all around you in every aspect of your life. And so it's part of our responsibility of understanding God's ways when we enter into the new place. And that's what we've entered into right now. But this passage reveals the need for teaching the younger generation the need, excuse me if I can speak, the ways of the Lord, so they too can enter and stay into the land. And it's one thing to be allowed to enter, but an entirely different thing to be able to maintain it. But what does that mean? Because to me, that's a generic statement. Pardon me. It's generic in the respect that if I don't know what God expects of me, then what am I going to do? What does he want me to do? And so what I'm learning in my own walk right now is that as God brings me deeper into all truth, I'm having to be honest with myself. Pardon me, please. All this mess is in the atmosphere. It's horrible. But I'm having to be honest with myself. And in being honest with myself, I'm allowing God to put his finger on some things, and I'm allowing God to get me free from some things that hinder him from coming in at deeper levels, which means he's talking about deep love there. He's talking about deep love. And part of maintaining our new land with God is being able to do things God's way. God's ways aren't our ways. And we've said we want more of the Ancient of Days. We've said that. I don't know about you. I've heard all the people talking about revival and everything. Well, what do you think that is? Think about that. What in the heck do you think that is? We're talking about revival, to be revived, to come alive, to come into all truth, which helps bring that in. Sorry. God is the way, the truth, and the life. I'm so sorry. But to be revived means you're going to have to get to know love again. Well, what do you do when you fall in love with somebody? You let them get to know you through intimacy. Okay, so intimacy means into me see. I'm allowing you to see inside. I'm allowing you to come into my inner circle, and I'm allowing you to get to know the real me, to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, or whatever you think it is that God wants you to see. But he reveals you to me through his spirit, and vice versa. So while that's happening, then that brings in authenticity. You start getting real with one another. You get honest with each other. That's what you're going to do with him. That's what you're going to do with him. So why not start now? Why not start now? Right? So, okay. So this is the way we start moving into love again. And so because though each way we're developed or built by God, I believe that we're geared to have personal tendencies that kind of make us behave in certain ways that don't always reflect that genuineness. That's just a personality makeup. And it's also part of your tribe. And so, and it's called a strength and a weakness. And so I think it's out of fear too of being hurt again and again, as in times past, because what we believed back then, and we tried to believe that people loved us the way that we were. Pardon me. I believe the reason why a lot of people did get hurt or did get burned was because of witchcraft releasing Jezebel into the atmosphere. That was a strategy to get society cold, to get us to shut down and isolate. So we wouldn't know how to understand the stages of love or understand the stages of relating and healthy relating. Can I go there right now, God? Okay, so I'm going to try to segue into this real quick before I go into this next section. I had an encounter this week and I've had many, actually, I've seen this many places where I notice people when they relate with each other, and even with me, I'm so sorry that, please excuse me, by the way. But I noticed that people jump the gun in relating. They jump the gun. They don't let things unfold. And so I was having this interaction business wise with this person, and they start telling me all this stuff, their personal life and all. And I'm thinking, whoa, Blue, whoa, baby. I'm thinking, I don't need to know all that. Please back that truck up out of my driveway because I don't want to know your personal stuff. This isn't that type of a relationship. So not only did they not understand the differences in relating with different people in different atmospheres, they didn't even understand how to relate. And so they just, and this is what I'm seeing everywhere right now. I see it in church, I see it at work, I see it in family, I see it everywhere. Everybody's jumping the gun. But see, not everybody, if you understand anything about the Lord, He specifically got kingdom set up in a very organized way. There's an outer court, there's an inner court, and then there's a holy of holies. What's the difference? The difference in the outer court, if I were to meet somebody, they'd say, "Do you know that Melissa Hood?" And they would probably say, "Oh yeah, I went to school with her. Yeah, I know her, but I don't know her." And then if you were to go into the inner court, they'd say, "Do you know that Melissa Hood?" And they would say, "Oh yeah, I know her. Yeah, she lives down the street. She's my neighbor, and we talk. We she walks down my street, and we talk here and there. She's a really sweet person. Blah 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 blah." But that's about as much as they know me. And then my inner court are my close circle of friends. "Do you know that Melissa Hood?" And my friends would say, "Yeah. How can I help you? How can I help you?" And they're going to want to ask some questions and then quiz you about what your intentions are towards me if they're my friend. My friends look out for me. I look out for them. I'm a protective friend. And so they're going to love you through the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're going to love you despite yourself, hopefully, but they're also going to hold you accountable because better the wounds of a friend than the wounds of an enemy. So, this next part we're fixing to enter into, if you're religious, if you operate in a religious spirit, just brace yourself because this is probably going to trigger you and it's probably going to make you recoil in fear, probably in gasp, but brace yourself because I'm going here anyway. Okay. So, and it's because it's going to require you to learn to get reacquainted with yourself again. And a lot of you, if you're operating in a spirit of religion, this is going to already make you feel uncomfortable. So, and it's because of that spirit of death structure that you operate in. And instead of just being open and following the spirit through a thing to show you what he might have to say about a thing, if anybody uses words that a lot of you that operate in this thing don't like, you shut them down. Oh no, that can't be God. When God very well may he may be in it, which I think he is. So trust the Lord in here. Maybe walk with me through this thing, but especially if you've been hurt by really messed up people, which doesn't help conversations. But this is part of the problem. I think that God's trying to bring us out of. It's part of the problem that 3/4 of the church are struggling with because it deals with identity. It deals with identity. And remember, we talked about, have you ever felt fully alive? That's part of having identity, knowing who you are. And um, and it's probably because these people have never had a powerhouse encounter with the Lord at any deeper level than the rainwater on a sidewalk. But He's trying to take us deeper in this hour. You understand, right? God's trying to take us deeper. And so getting to know yourself again might be terrifying for some of you. And the only thing I can equate that to is like when someone goes through the death of a spouse or a divorce, because then they're forced in those situations and they're forced into getting to know themselves again when they weren't planning on that. They had established their life, they had established who they thought that they were with a husband or a wife. And so that these situations are forced change on these people. But this is the place the bride finds herself in. This is the place of forced change if you want to see and operate in the Ancient of Days again. So I think that getting to know yourselves also entails admitting crappy things to ourselves about ourselves, the bad side of ourselves, dealing with bad heart conditions and the things that we think we're hiding from everybody around us, but note to self. Everybody sees she's you, but you. So anyway, good luck there. But I'll be praying for you. So on back onto my topic. But anyway, so here we go to TikTok. I'm back on TikTok now. So I look at TikTok almost every other night. I try not to get too involved in it, but it's fun. It's fun. So I notice in my feed, I'm so sorry. What pops up in my feed is the zodiac. And if you haven't caught my buddy Chris Carter's book, you need to go buy. I'm trying to get this on here. Buy Cosmic Journey by Chris Carter. This is a godly. It's a great book. You need to go check it out. It's highly prophetic. Highly prophetic. I'm so sorry. It talks about the zodiac because you know how we've talked to you here about to know yourself, know your God, know yourself, know your God. And knowing yourself means knowing the signs and the times. Is this not a sign? Is this not a signpost? I'm trying to get that to you without it cutting off. Cosmic Journey. It's a sign. Also, this is a sign inwardly, but there are signs outwardly, right? Sounds outwardly prophetic signs. So know the signs and the times. And so in order to come through time, then in order to get reacquainted with God again, we're getting to know ourselves again. We're getting to know the good, the bad, and the ugly while we're getting to know Him. Okay, we're getting to know love again. And so while I was looking at TikTok, though, I noticed that, man, I can't stand this stuff. I noticed that, God kept bringing up things about my sign. And I'm a Scorpio, in case anybody wants to know. I'm like 3 days in, and I don't really get into that because I believe love covers a multitude. And if love's covering a multitude, then I can get along with anybody. But I just started listening to this and asking the Lord, why is this coming up? And the Lord said, because I'm trying to help you get to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about yourself so you can let me deal with some things. I thought, wow. And so anyway, sometimes getting to know your truest sense of self can be scary and it can be intense. But again, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm all about intensity. Just like bring it on. That's my middle name. And I like stuff like this. I like helping people. And I like, analyzing people and things like that and helping them with the prophetic gifts. So it's a lot of fun to me. But I also realized that knowing who you are and not who you thought you were, not who you thought you were, but really knowing yourself is a blessing because it also usually entails knowing what your purpose is. And when I was operating in my fleshly self, the only way I know how to depict this is when I was operating in my fleshly self. What happened was that I pursued things in my flesh like Hollywood, and I went into costuming design. I started off designing multi-million-dollar shows for churches, and I was really blessed. I got really, really blessed by the Lord because He allowed me to do things that other people weren't allowed to do at my age. And I was designing shows that seniors in college were designing. I was only a sophomore. And so it was a real blessing to have that big of a budget and to be able to design those size shows, which eventually led me to Hollywood because I was so determined to go there. And that was where my flesh wanted to go. And so God said, okay, I'll let you go, but I'm going to come get you because there's somewhere else I'd really rather take you. But I'm going to let you do this for a season, Missy, but I'm going to come and I'm going to visit you. And he sure did. One day on set, he came in. I told you about that. He visited me and I was just so fed up. Sorry. I was so fed up with the Hollywood scene that I walked into work one day and I was on set and I was loading a trailer for one of our stars. I used to work with A-listers and I walked in and I thought, I hate this job. And I said it out loud and I thought, I hope nobody was here to hear me say that because I had a really good job and my career was taking off. I was working on a lot of commercials and stuff. And I really enjoyed my job to a point until that point, actually, because I liked it for the wrong reasons. I think I liked it because I liked it as long as it was full of the glitz and the glamour, but it was empty. It was just so empty. And so what I found myself doing on set was I always was praying for people, praying for the stars, praying for the production crew, praying for every time. I'll be in the trailers, in the costuming trailer, and I'd bring my prayers with me in my purse, and I'd call my prayer buddy and I'd say, "Hey, let's pray." and we pray for like an hour and a half while everybody was on set working on different scenes and stuff. And then everything would just go miraculously wonderful. And then these stars would be drawn to me. Like I won't tell you that, but had a conversation with Mimi Rogers and I had to talk to her and get to know her a little bit. And hopefully, well, I hope she continued on, but she ended up going back home for Christmas that year because we shot over into the next year for this one film I was working on. And she went back to church that Christmas because I had to talk to her about the Lord. And I said, you need to go back to your roots. And so God was giving me prophetic words even then. And then he met me that day like he promised he would. And he said, let's begin again. Let's begin again because this isn't really where I wanted you. It's over here, which is where I'm at right now, which is actually a shock to me. It really is a shock to me because when I'm talking about the things of the flesh versus the things of the spirit and knowing yourself, we can think we know something about what we want to do or what we want until God brings it to you. And he's been preparing you inside for that thing. And then you find out what he gives you, and it's better than anything, better than anything. And you can't outgive God. That's the best part of the conversation. So where God's bringing you to, it's the double, pardon me. He's bringing your spirit man alive in him into the double where heaven becomes alive within you and he endues you with power. And I'm not talking about just a little dabble, do you? I'm talking about major firepower. And so, and that's why you want to go check out I'm going to give a shameless plug to our Deadly Charge series at ezekielswill.org. It's ezekiels-will.org. And the series explains a lot about what people are going through right now. And it teaches you to deal with you. It teaches you to get over you. And it moves you in time fast, like about 85% less the time. That's how fast you get deliverance there. So go check that out. But this is what God is talking about right now, where he's telling you, I'm not asking you to do this anymore. I'm commanding you. It's not a directive. It's not instruction. It's a command. If you want to come out and you want to come through, then you're going to deal with you. That's what he's been saying this whole time. So it's a command. It's part of becoming a holy priesthood and being seated beside Christ in heavenly places. If you want to come up into higher firepower, you've got to get to know you, but more importantly, you got to get to know your king. And so doing only what he says, his way and not yours, because there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end is death. It's suffering. And so you don't want to continue on in your own ways because you're causing your own pain. Okay. The flesh always causes its own pain. And that's what Ishmaels do. Ishmaels cause a lot of pain, the things the flesh creates. So brings us to Luke 3:23-38. And it's talking about the prophecy, God's message of resting for frontrunners. And actually, the first frontrunner was John the Baptist, man. If you don't know anything about that, he was Jesus's cousin. Pardon me. And Jesus loved him dearly. He loved him dearly. And if you know anything about John, John is probably a lot like you and I, if you're a front runner. He was all truth. He was prophesying. He was called to prophesy all truth. All truth. He was preparing the way of the Lord. And boy, was he a truth prophet. He was a truth prophet. And he had a ministry which some thought was just as weird as him. He was strange. He was different. He was set apart. Most like most of the Josephs and the front runners are. If you're a front runner, usually you're a Joseph. So, it's kind of like me. I kind of feel like I'm just kind of strange like that in that sense, but I don't feel like I'm strange. I just know I'm quirky. And I kind of like being quirky. I like being who God made me to be. It's fun. I like being me. Hopefully you like being you too. And and see if this is the place the body could get to, it's this place of liking themselves again. Because I get the feeling in my spirit from all the things I've been reading and the ways that people have been behaving. I don't think these people like themselves very much. That's why they're always hiding behind a mask. They're hiding behind a mask, this plastic mask of fakeness. And oh, let me just pretend. Let me try to convince you that this is who I am. And the Lord says, that's not who you are. Whoop, ripping the veil off. Woohoo! Here we go. Surprise, surprise. Not like anybody knew it wasn't there anyway. Because your sin will find you out. So whatever you're trying to hide It finds you out. It finds its way out. So you might as well just deal with it and get it off your vessel, right? Wouldn't that make more sense? So anyway, John was called to prepare the way of the Lord. This is what the truth prophets are called to do now, which moves us to Psalm 62, 1 through 12. And it talks about waiting, understanding who you are, understanding how to proceed forward into authenticity, pardon me, and accepting who Christ made you to be, accepting what's going on around you, and then understanding that sometimes in the waiting, although your test can get hard, he's in control. He's in control. And so I think it's part of the intercession process that he's teaching us to step into now as we're learning to step back into him. And you know what the Lord showed me about that? He showed me that the reason that the testings had to be this slow is because if God were to pour himself out on us, it would kill us. He's a weighty God. While he's muscling us up, he's doing it slowly. He's bringing us into deep love slowly so that he doesn't harm us because he knows we're fragile. He knows we're human. And I know probably for you unbelievers out there, or maybe people that aren't as mature in the spirit, not like I am, but if you're on a different spiritual pace, let me say it like that, you're probably thinking, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, you move from faith to faith and glory to glory. And that's how God changes your story. You're maturing in him. Hopefully you're moving through the transformation process. However, a lot of people wonder why their futures have evaded them, why some of them haven't gotten married, why some of them haven't entered into what God had promised them. It's because they refuse to deal with what's within. If you don't change on the inside, God can't give you what you want on the outside. He usually doesn't, because he's a responsibility God. He wants you to be ready for the thing that you're asking for. So if you're not being prepared and not listening to the ways of the Lord, then quit asking. Quit asking. You're wasting your time. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and people hate Scorpios for that, by the way, because we're so blunt. And actually, no, it's not because of that. I'm just a truth prophet. I'm actually double truth. So, and I'm at the 11 o'clock hour, so I'm in the tribe of Manasseh. So bingo, here we go. If God sent you across my pathway, woohoo, here we go. Hold your jets. So the tests get hard sometimes. And it doesn't, waiting on God doesn't mean being idle. Doesn't mean that you stop doing what you do, regardless of how hard the test is. But it does mean in your waiting, if you want to get through, then you're going to be listening and watching for what the prophet, the lead prophet, the rabbi, he's the rabbi, Jesus is a rabbi, what it would have you do. You're looking for keys because you can't go to the next thing unless you've done the last thing God told you to do. So it's a command now, not a directive. Remember what I just said to you a while ago. And it means you're not to quit, but you are to quit grumbling and complaining. Don't grumble and complain anymore and asking, when God, when we get 6 flags, God. And so, but I just talked about this, about getting to the place of understanding. And getting to that place of understanding what God expects of you in this maturity place actually creates what he's looking for, which is endurance in you. It's endurance and being able to wait for a thing. And it teaches us that suffering isn't in vain. It also teaches us things that we would otherwise have not learned, had we not learned to wait on the King. Isn't that interesting? And so it's funny to me. It's not funny, actually. I'm going through just like you. And so, but when I made the statement in my Jeep yesterday, and I said, I don't want to get so consumed with this, feeling like I'm living in Groundhog Day, getting up one day and doing the same thing the next day, doing the same thing, waiting, doing the same thing, doing the same thing, doing the same thing. You got to go on living, man. You're going to waste your years. And he's going to do it. And let me tell you how I know this, because 35 years ago, right after my dad died, I was really caught up in a lot of the grief because God was dealing with me, obviously, about that because of what had transpired. And I was praying one night and I said, God, I want to go to England. I've never been to England, and I want to go to Scotland and Wales. And I started listing off all these places. And I said, I want to go to the Virgin Islands. And I started listing off all these dreams that I had. And you think God forgets a thing. And then 10 years later, because in that 10-year time span, I went back to school. But after I graduated from college, my mom came to me and she said, honey, she said, I got us tickets to go to England for your graduation. And I thought, really? And I knew instantly that was an answered prayer. I thought, holy smokes, he didn't forget. He heard my answer, or he heard my prayer. And then in 2015, now mind you, I asked for a trip to the Virgin Islands too. Now I've gone since asked for more things. But in 2015, about a year before I was going to get laid off, I had my boss come to me and he said, Missy, we're giving, because our companies had merged with another company. And so they gave people different bonuses. And they'd given me a $3,000 bonus. And I thought, wow, that's a wonderful thing. I'm happy as clam. Well, my boss calls me in and he says, Missy, and I thought, what are they going to take it back? They're going to take it back, aren't they? They're going to take it back. They're taking back my bonus. And he said, no, why would they do that? I said, because this has just been that crazy. This whole transition's been that crazy. So I just wouldn't put it past him. He said, well, you're a negative Nelly. And I was like, no, I just know y'all's track record. And he said, no, as a matter of fact, they're not just giving you 3,000, Missy, they're giving you 6,000. And I said, oh, well, look at that. I'll be doggone. And I had to watch. I slinked out of there because I thought, oh God, I'm really, really sorry. I'm really sorry about that one. But then I went back into my boss, Rick, and I said, Rick, he said, what? And I said, I'm taking a cruise. I'm going to the Virgin Islands. And it just came out of my mouth. And I thought, oh, he's going to do it. And he made a way. He made a way for me to do it. I went on the neatest cruise, man. We went to about 9 different islands. And but he remembers. He remembers. And he makes a way where there is no way. And it always pops up, least when you least expect it. It always pops up when you least expect it. So you cannot give God. And you don't want the Ishmaels. Ishmael are things that you create, that you try to make happen, and then they don't come out the way that you think that they're going to come out. They usually create a lifelong situation, and then you're stuck with the outcome. When had you just waited, had you just sat your little butt down and waited on the Lord, he would have brought you an above and beyond blessing. But you cannot give him. You cannot give him. And by the way, when you try to, I've already said, I'm not going to repeat myself, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? So it's the Isaac you want and not what you can create, because the only thing man has ever been able to create is a mess. So learn to wait on him and learn to wait well. Wait well. And quit your mumbling and your complaining, because grumbling pulls you out of faith. It pulls you out of faith. It gets you into doubt, unbelief, discouragement. Strike those things down. And it causes you to lose focus. And that's where your faith is trying to take you. You want to go where your faith is taking you, not where the devil's trying to take you. So then, which brings us, as we wrap up today, we're right on time, finishing 5 minutes early. Look at there. Proverbs 11, 18 through 19. And it states this, because we are in a really peculiar place. Before I read this, we're in a very, very peculiar place. And I think that it's easy to get kind of downcast. And so you purposely have to focus on joy, and you very purposefully and strategically have to thank God and focus on the good things that God is doing for you, and not what the enemy's trying to create around you, because warfare is going to be high during this time. It's already started to amp up as of about a week or two ago, but especially about a week ago. It's amping up because we're entering into C2. Remember, April through August, it's major warfare, major witchcraft. Those are the devil's playground months. That's when they have all their demonic feasts, the druidic feast, all these different things, but it's all over the world. And so it's creating this atmosphere of major, major witchcraft. And it's really, really hard to navigate through. And if you want to make it through, keep watching my revs. I'm not a tell-all-be-all, but I guarantee you, God shows me about this stuff. And so he will help you, and you will find out what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Okay? I give him all the glory for that, because it's all him, not me. But this is what Proverbs 11, 18 through 19 states for you. The wicked worketh a deceitful work. But to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward. And as righteousness tendeth to life, so he that pursueth evil pursueth it to his own death. Man's greatest weakness is his natural inclination to see what he wants to see, not what God wants him to see, but it's to be what he wants, what is right in his own eyes. That is man's natural inclination. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to turn you on to letting you know what's fixing to happen in my world. And we're fixing to get this thing hopping and bumping. And I just want you to see what's coming this summer. But we're fixing to take off and start our national book tour. And I want you to see that. Margaret and I are fixing to take off. Hopefully, we're going to be starting it off in New York and ramping it up in Nashville, Austin, and then ramping it back up in LA. And so try to catch us in one of these book signings. We're talking about Through the Lens, and then we're going to also be segueing that into just a conversation way. And it explains, and we talk about Margaret's role in the movie industry. She's in jewelry design. Was in costuming design. I will always probably be a designer. But we talked to you a little bit about how God used us both and brought our families back together after a really hard tragedy in my family. We lost 3 members of my family in the same family. My uncle lost his wife and his 2 children. 2 children 2 weeks apart. And so he lost all members of his family within probably a little over a year. And it was just really hard. It was very, very hard on our family. And so it brought Margaret and I together because she was married to my cousin, who was my uncle's son. And Brett was her husband. But she wrote a book with me about it and about our journeys in heaven and about the reality of heaven and what God can do for you. And it brought heaven alive. I mean, she is so on fire for God, and it's just so cool to see, man. And so I just want to encourage you. If you haven't bought the book, it's on sale right now too. It's at Amazon.com, but it will really bless you if you're struggling with hardship, if you're struggling with anything, any type of loss. I mean, it's about healing, but it's a different take on it. It's not about grief. It's about rebounding. And we're looking at it from a different perspective because in my whole life, I've only seen 2 people in my whole life that have rebounded as fast as Margaret. And she's one of them. And then my friend Lisa after the death of her sister. And so go check it out. Go check it out. I think it will really touch your heart and minister to you, but it'll also give you a different way to walk through those difficulties that God has you tested in. So anyway, I love you guys. I'll be catching up with you probably Friday. We'll talk again on Friday, but until then, I'll talk to you then. Bye, guys.